Hi everyone, welcome back to Rudner Revolution. I'm Abigail Rudner and this is part 2 of the CHOPS 1 exercise. In this exercise I'm going to show you how to reset your workspace, customize it a bit, set type, and prepare to import some photos. We'll take a look at the color and swatches panels and even add a gradient. Alright, first things first, I want to customize my workspace a little bit and show you here I can drag this dark top portion of this tools panel and click these small arrows on the far right to reset how the tools are laid out in Photoshop. I like to put them over on the right. I'm right-handed. In addition, I'm going to make some adjustments to the heights of some of the panels here. Bring the swatches panel to the front. Make the color panel smaller again. There we go. I'm going to bring the layers panel up. So the adjustments panel is below it and channels up here into layers. Okay. Now with these settings, I'm going to save my own custom workspace. How to do that? Here we go. Under Window Workspace, I will choose New Workspace. And I will set this one as Abby Fave and I will set this as Abby Fave 01. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And now if we take a look up here in the workspace area, you can see there are some different settings. Here's the My Essentials workspace, and this one is another workspace that I made at a different time called Simple. So depending on what kind of work you're doing in your Photoshop document, you may want to create different panels, different setups of your workspaces. This one is more geared toward type. Right, back we go into my Abby Fave 01 workspace, and we're going to continue by dragging out the layers palette. I'll place it over here on the left. Now on the right we can see channels, and on the left we can see layers, and I will come back and talk more about this channels palette later, but let's focus over here on the layers panel. In Photoshop we have different types of layers. Right now we have one solid white layer. If we hide this layer by clicking the eyeball, we see that behind this layer is checkers, and those checkers represent transparency in Photoshop, and that's just a good thing to keep in mind in general as you become more familiar with the kinds of things that Photoshop can do in terms of blending layers together and showing multiple transparencies. So I'm going to re-show that layer or unhide it. Come over to my type tool. A good thing to understand is how type works in Photoshop. Specifically, how type will create its own layer. Make sure your type tool is selected. If it's not, go ahead and click on it and choose the horizontal type tool. This is one of the 4 type tools. We'll go over the rest of these type tools in later lessons. For now, I'll just choose this one and check to see that the fill color is something that's going to show up on the background. In this case, black will work. So that is in the foreground chip, and I'm going to come over to my document and simply click. Now at this point I could type some text, and it will be whatever settings are shown up here in the controls. You can change the font, change the size, and begin to type. What I often do, however, is I like to copy and paste type, either out of an email or a document someone sends me or something I find on the web. I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to tab over to a website here, which is the website of my astrology teacher, Anne Orderly, who is an amazing astrologer. If you ever want to get your chart done, you should check out her work. She does a weekly weather report teaching about what is going on in the planets and how you can work with them. Wonderful tools, astrology. I have gone ahead here and clicked and dragged over this text, and I'm going to copy it. You could do that with a key command, or I can just choose Edit Copy, and I'm going to toggle back over to Photoshop. Then I'm going to select this text and choose Edit Paste. At this point, I can see my text size is okay, but the way the text is laying out in the sentence is too long. So making sure you still have your horizontal type tool selected, I'm going to click, and here I'll hit a return, and here I'll click before this tilde and hit a return, and I now have set up my basic type from my quote that I want to illustrate. Selecting all of the text, just like you would in Word or any other word processing program, I can come over and choose a font I like. I'm going to pick this one, Lobster 1.4 regular, and increase the size of the type. I can choose from a different size, or another thing you can do is click right in this field and use the up arrow in your keyboard to size the type until you like its size. Now I think that's looking pretty good. However, I want there to be more space between the lines. And to do that, I need another panel that I don't see showing here. So all the panels can always be opened and closed from this window called Window, or this menu called Window. And I want to go to the choice called Character. The Character panel pops up, and it gives me a little bit more detail than the Control panel does for controlling my text. And here I can see that the leading or the line spacing here is on auto. Since my font size is set at 39, I'm going to come in here and raise this to a lot more, like 48. And you can see it moved ever so slightly. And again, I can click in this field, select it, and use the up arrow key to increase the line height of my type, or the leading. That looks great, and I'm happy with it. So I'm going to close the Character panel. You can see, oh, look at that. This was the Character panel all along, this little icon. We have the paragraph in the Character panel. You can pop out these other panels, Properties, History. But I'm going to jump back over here to the Move tool. So now you've seen a couple of different ways to open panels under Window, or by clicking on these icon buttons for opening up additional panels. My type is set, and I want to move it into place. Selected the Move tool, clicking on the type. I'm going to drag it down here to the bottom-ish of my document and let it go. And it is now in place where I want it, and I'll go ahead and save this document. So I'm going to choose File, Save, and now you can see the name I gave it in the last exercise is in this field with the type in place. I'd like to change the background color, so it's important that I click on the background layer. That's called targeting that layer. With that layer targeted, I'm going to choose a new color for my background. From the Swatches panel, I can simply click on a color, and with that color selected, I'll choose Fill, and then Foreground Color from the Fill menu. With my lovely periwinkle blue color selected, I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I have filled the background with the new color. Interesting to note, if I want to put a gradient in this background instead of a solid color, the two colors that are initially on the foreground and background chip will be the first choice I have when I click the gradient tool. Let me show you what I mean. Here, I'm going to select the gradient tool from the tool panel, and then come up to the controls and click on this colored ramp. You'll notice there is a preset already set up for us, and it is the two colors in our foreground and background colors. I'm going to choose this, Click OK, click and drag, and you've created a nice subtle gradient in your document. Depending on the direction that you click and drag from and to, the way your gradient is positioned on the canvas will change. So I'm going to drag one more time here in the slight angle. Okay, one more time. Oh gee whiz, I'm going to do it one more time. I'm thinking that the gradient really isn't quite right, so I want to customize it a little more. I'm going to come up to the top again here and click on this ramp, which opens up the gradient editor. And you can see as I slide this chip, the blue color moves down, darkening the overall appearance of the gradient. If I click on the left side, I can add a chip of that same color, which you can see here on this color box. If I'd like to choose a different color, I can double click and make this darker. Sliding the sliders on the bottom moves the position of the colors in the gradient. For now, we'll keep this gradient 100% solid, but in a later lesson we'll talk about these chips, which are the transparency controls of the gradient. Now, you might think you would click Save to keep this particular gradient that you just designed in your gradient editor. However, that is not the way to keep this for later use. The way to keep this for later use is, first of all, I'm going to name it Blueberry Yum. And then click this button that says New. This is how you save a gradient, a custom gradient in Photoshop. So it is not Save, it is New. Save actually saves this grouping or whatever gradients that you select. But I want to keep this particular color blend or ramp or gradient for later. So I'm going to go ahead and click New and OK. Now the new gradient is loaded and I can click and drag and get a more dramatic effect. Click and drag through the entire canvas. And finally, click and drag past the edge. So make sure you go ahead and experiment with your gradients. Take a little time out. You can see there are a few different types of gradients. We've got a radial gradient, as well as a fold type gradient, a reflected gradient, and a diamond type. For me, at this point, I might want to click reverse, and let's look at that diamond again. By clicking reverse, white will be in the center instead of blue, and that's pretty nice. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop right here and go on to the next portion of our lesson, which is going to be starting to layer some photos into this graphic. Please join me in the next lesson as we continue to work with layers, photos, blends, and more.